one of the first questions was about the study's sample size and what is the role of the study sample size within conclusive effects?
The conclusive effects are based on the weights, and the weights are dependent on the sample size. So as we use the weights, we automatically use the sample size. No?
Okay.
If a study has more weight, and larger studies have more weight, then this is more evidence, and we use it within the weights. No?
Great. Regarding the conclusive effects again, Dorian asked the idea of conclusive effects. What if you have a conclusive effect, but you downgrade the evidence due to heterogeneity and imprecision, and you end up with very low certainty of evidence? Is this still conclusive? So that has to do with grade and the assessment of the evidence.
Yeah, in our benefit reports, we do not use grade. Yes, we have our own IQWIC system. I think all explanations required for this are too long, because this has to do with the German law, where we have to make a clear recommendation, and we have to say something about the certainty of the results, not within grade, but so that it is conform with German law. And in IQWIC we distinguish between proof, indication, and hint. This is very similar to grade, but we have our own system. There's a publication of my colleague Guido Skipka in the Biometrical Journal, where you can read this, or you can also use the IQWIC methods paper, which is available in the internet. It's also available in English. Coming to the first question, yes, we look whether the effects are conclusive. And when there are only moderately conclusive, then there's less certainty of the results compared to the situation when they are clearly conclusive. When they are clearly conclusive, we have a proof of an effect. And if they are only moderately conclusive, we have only, for example, indication, which is lower. This is very similar to grade, but it's just another language.
Okay. Great. So Gustavo also asked, what do you think about Bayesian approach for meta-analysis with few studies? And similar to that, Adrian also asked, when you say few studies, are you saying irrespective of the amount of data? Would the situation differ if few events or few participants versus larger studies and larger number of events?
As I understood, the first question was what I think about Bayesian methods. This probably the question was before my outlook. No? I think Bayesian methods are very useful, but are only helpful in a situation with very few studies if you use the informative priors. If you use non-informative priors, you will end up with the same problems as Hartung-Knapp-Siedig-Jonkman. But if you have useful informative priors for tau, then Bayesian methods are very useful. Yes, if you have not very few studies, if you have 6 studies, but all studies are very, very small, there are similar problems. But I have looked in my talk today to the situation with very few studies. But of course, if you have very few events or very few sample sizes, you have similar problems. No?
Right. And that's relevant to the question by Nang that says, what is the number of studies to be considered large enough to perform a meta-analysis? Do we need more than 5 studies? Do we need more than 10 studies? Yeah, so maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, there are no clear thresholds. Just as a rough guide, I would say few studies is a situation with 2 to 10 studies. Very few studies is a situation with 2, 3, and 4 studies. 5 to 10 is also few, but we use as a standard approach random effects model with Hart und Knapp, Siedig, Jonkman if we have 5 studies or more. And if we have 2 studies, we use as a standard approach the fixed effect model. And in the case of 3 and 4 studies, we use this complicated procedure I tried to explain today. But of course, if you have 5 or 6 studies, it's not so that all problems are gone. But it depends on the data situation. When you think about my very first examples with 6 studies, maybe you have no problems there and can do a standard approach for meta-analysis. But of course, it depends on the sample size of the studies. It depends on the heterogeneity and so on.